Hello there, sword friends. I am really at a loss for what to say, but I am trying to maintain an upload schedule and I don't want to just say shit for the purposes of saying shit, and I have so much stuff to review and do and make videos on, and I'm trying to do it all at once because I'm a fucking moron sometimes. But in an effort to maintain a somewhat regular style of, like upload sometime between Thursday and Monday, at least once a week-ish or more, I am going to talk about some things, and they are interesting. I just wish I had time to do a better job. Just as an update for what is going on at the right now-ish time frame, I am working on a Cold Steel Emperor Katana review. I got a katana back from Cold Steel, and I'm working on it. It's taking time. There's a lot of stuff to say and do, and yeah, I'm doing it though. So there's that, and then I have some other stuff that I'm working on that's in the pipe that I've got video for. I've got the Citadel Bamboo Katana that I'm working on. I also have another Skyjiro Katana review, the Domo Katana thing that I've got video and cutting and all that, but video editing takes so much goddamn time. It's really hard to, one, articulate what the hell I want to say in a way that anyone can understand, but also then to like hodgepodge it with video clips that I have so that the thing that I'm actually trying to say and the thing that goes along with it with the video and stuff makes sense in a logical format that's digestible for average humans that understand words. And most of the time, I'm rambling now. The point is, I'm working on a lot of stuff. I'm going, and stay tuned for that. But I'm working on it. The things I'm going to talk about right now, though, talking with my hands is fun because I have hands. Some things that are interesting to note. So one, this is a recent find for me. This is a blade by Jody Sampson. Now, if you're not familiar with Jody Sampson, he's the guy that designed probably most notably the swords in Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer. If you were a child back then watching those movies and kind of fell in love with swords, and they helped fuel your interest in swords and HEMA and swordsmanship and all of the other random things that are out there related to swords, he's one of the guys that designed those swords and made them as cool as they are. He also made a whole bunch of different swords, and this happened to be one of them. Now, regrettably, Jody Sampson passed away some time ago, and the folks that knew him speak very highly of him and his character, and this is the first piece that I've owned that's made by him. I really don't know much about him as a smith. I've kind of eyeballed getting a Conan the Barbarian sword for a very long time because I thought that movie was cool as shit, but alas, they're really expensive. So this one came up for sale recently, and I picked it up just because of who made it, not because I know the style or anything particularly well. I don't have any idea what I'm going to do with it, but it was a good chance for me to look at some of Jody Sampson's work, since he seems to come pretty highly recommended. And what I know so far is this is obviously some sort of artistic interpretation of a blade, and I find it kind of interesting that Jody Sampson gets accolades for doing artistic interpretations, kind of original ideas on traditional blades. I don't exactly know if this would be like a cutlass or a scimitar or some sort of thick saber. I'm not exactly sure what this is even an interpretation of, but when he does fantasy designs, it seems like a lot of people really appreciate his workmanship, his quality, his thought and design, and when I feel this in my hand, it is a kind of a stout, hefty blade. It's very thick at the spine. It has a nice, interesting distal taper. Just a lot of interesting stuff going on, really. It's a very fun piece. But it does feel kind of stout and hard to move in the hand. I'm not exactly sure why. Honestly, I got this just the other day, and I haven't really even given a thought or had enough time to formulate a great opinion of it or review it or even figure out what the hell it actually is supposed to be emulating and what that is in fact supposed to feel like. So don't take any commentary that I have too seriously, because I don't really know what the hell I'm talking about right now. But when I look at it, I do find it interesting that so many folks look at other folks that do artistic interpretations or fantasy-esque things and say, well, I don't know that they necessarily give too much grief, but there's a certain sense of chagrining that goes along with making fantasy pieces and breaking from tradition. But the man that made this blade seems to get accolades for it. I find that interesting, and I hope to understand a little bit more as to why that is, why the community accepts ideas like this but not necessarily some other things, or why it's accepted from some artists and not others. If you can help me unravel that mystery, throw it below. What I do find most interesting about this blade is if I'm looking at the flats, and this is going to be really hard to see without doing better camera work, but one thing that I notice about this blade is that the grinding, the flats of the blade most notably, look like they're ground by two different people, and I can't explain why. It's not that one is flatter than the other. There are imperfections and there's some ripples along the surface. It's not what you would necessarily expect, or what I would come to expect from a modern custom piece, at least one that cost a good amount of money. But there's kind of ripples along the surface, but they're done differently. So it's they're both good, but it looks like it was ground by two different people almost, because they're in different spots in different places. And I don't really know why that is. Anyway, I'll do more research. I'll try to figure it out. And anyway, there's one thing that happened that I think is pretty cool, and I'm pretty happy with it. Blah. Alright, next cool thing to talk about. This is a Hanwei tactical wakizashi. These things have been discontinued and recontinued. I don't know exactly what's going on with them, but a lot of people think they're really cool, and they were pretty highly sought after for a time, and I happened to find them for sale secondhand not too long ago, and I bought them. And I had the katana and I've had the tanto, and looking at this, it was just I think I've even had this one, though. Honestly, I don't remember. The tactical wakizashi is an interesting piece. It's just basically a wakizashi blade mounted like a knife, but it has this kind of metal or plastic sheath. I'm not exactly sure what to call it, and it's mounted up tactically. It feels nimble but stouter, honestly, than most wakizashi do. It almost kind of has the weight in your hand of a katana. I wouldn't necessarily call it balanced or lively, but it's supposed to be made out of a particular type of steel that is very, very durable, and it's mounted up without seppa or some of the other bits that you kind of come to expect in a katana. It's got a very unusually thick tang or nakago that you can see along the base, and it's rusting a little bit, I guess indicating that it's carbon steel. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with this thing yet, but it is tactical, I guess. I'm not really a tactical guy. I don't know what to say about tactical. I have no idea what would make this tactical or not tactical, but just at a quick glance as I look at it, this kurigata appears to be glued on, or at least it looks like it could separate, and if it is and you're bouncing it around and you're in a tactical situation, you're moving around and all sorts of vibration and impact and whatnot is happening, I'm concerned that might come loose, as it often does, but it's a full ring. Supposedly there are mole connectors. I can't remember exactly how it's pronounced, but there's some sort of connector that maybe you could attach it to your backpack or something. It is more elegant than machete, so if you're gonna go backpacking, this would probably be the more ideal version of a wakizashi to carry with you. But then again, it's not a machete. It's not made for really cutting just brush away. It doesn't have the same profile as a machete would, and it's certainly more expensive than one. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what's going on with this tactical wakizashi, and I'll probably do some tests and whatnot on it later. But overall, it seems reasonably well put together. Nothing is loose. This is not great. It kind of wiggles around a little bit. But, if it's, well, this is the other bit that kind of is concerning, is that this is not particularly tight. But then again, like paracord or something very simple could resolve that issue. The point is, though, from a tactical perspective, I don't really know what to think. If you have some thoughts, throw it in the thingy thing below. If you'd like to see something reviewed in relation to this, or see what it does, and you have some ideas for me, throw them in the commentary below, and I will stuff. All right, the next bit that I have in terms of stuff to talk about is this. This is a ska from a Hanwei Wind and Thunder. Now, not too long ago, somebody pinged me and was like, hey, do you want to buy the ska and suba and whatnot from my Hanwei Wind and Thunder? I know you have some sort of unhealthy obsession with swirly mitsudomes, and this thing has some. Now, initially, I was going to buy just the Fujikashira, which are the bit at this end and the bit at this end. And it was just easier to send me the whole bit, so I paid a little bit more and got the kind of whole shoot and match here. Now, my intention was to use the ska to kind of illustrate what paneled is. This was a good chance to just see a ska and have one as an example as I'm explaining other sword stuff. But this is a good chance for me to show some of the things. This supposedly came off a brand new Hanwei Wind and Thunder. I didn't receive the Hanwei Wind and Thunder, so I guess disclaimer, I don't know for certain, but I really have no reason to doubt that this came off a brand new Hanwei Wind and Thunder, and it appears to be unused, unscathed, and in all other ways new. So here's the Suba. One thing I'll note is that this is the Wind and Thunder Suba, and it doesn't appear to have a whole lot of cutting or grinding or anything in it. I'm really happy with Hanwei's casting quality. They've been making the Wind and Thunder a long time, but there's still a lot of detail in this casting. You can make out some of the detail in the Thunder God's hair, and it's, you know, overall they just seem to do a little bit better job than some of the other bits out there. Not to say that it's perfect. It is still cast, it's not carved, but I think they do a pretty good job with casting. That's one thing Hanwei's done pretty consistently over time. As I look at the ska, though, there's some things that I think are worth noting from a new Hanwei ska. They tend to get a reputation for being axe handle-like, and this may be a great example as to why that is. It just means that it's really thick. Now, I have a large glove size, and it fits my hands reasonably well, but it's just a little big and not necessarily as refined as it could be. It's not bad. Maybe you like having a kind of meaty ska, but they are just kind of hefty in terms of their construction. And you might think that that's good because it makes it more resilient, and I'll touch on that in a little bit, but they kind of have a reputation for just being meaty. This is an example of said meatiness. Some of their other blades aren't as meaty. The Orchid, the Shinto, all have somewhat smaller skas. Some of the special editions, like the Bamboo Snake, I believe, was one that had a very kind of refined ska to it. This one, though, is hefty, and the reason that the practitioner, the person that bought the new Hanwei Wind and Thunder, sent it to me was because he was going to have a new ska made because he didn't like the feel of this one. So anyway, here's the new ska. You can see that the Ito is serviceably tight, but really not as tight as I would hope for on a new blade. But it's not bad. It's kind of, I would say, average, and average is maybe a great way to describe many of the things that Hanwei is, because they've set the standard in terms of what to aspire to. Things that aren't as tight as this are below average. Things that are tighter are above average. It's interesting that a lot of times I use Hanwei as a basis to say what is or isn't good. If it's Hanwei kind of is the standard, and that says something. So as much as I might rag on it, keep in mind that they've kind of set the precedent in terms of what is or isn't good. So anyway, moving on. As I look, the Ito is averagely tight. And what I mean by that is I can move it, I can push it. It is movable, but it's tight enough that it doesn't come loose. I can pull on the kashra, it doesn't wiggle around. Over the Manuki, it wiggles just about as much as everywhere else. It's not loose in any particular spots. The diamonds, as you can see, are even-ish, but not really perfect. Some are big, some are small, some are off to the left or right, just not perfect. In terms of the alignment, you can see that there's a little bit of a lip or edge, but it's not necessarily enormous. Here, it looks like the Ito is a little bit bunched up around the kashra. The main thing that I would say, and the reason I think this is actually worth talking about right now, despite the amount of rambling that I've done about their casting quality and some of the other bits, is that this new ska is cracked. It's got a big old fucking crack in it. It's not on the seam. I'm not being silly. It's not just along one of the flats. Off to the side over here, there is a good sized crack in the ska, and there is another one along the back over here, but it does not appear to be as significant. And that's kind of the thing that I would say about these ska. Now, bear in mind that when I say Hanwei sets the standard, this is still a very common problem in production swords. Many of the swords that get sent out have cracked Tsukas, cracked handles underneath here. They might be cracked all the way down. They might have a big fat wide crack. They might have really tiny stress cracks. They might have cracked in shipping. They might have cracked because of humidity or temperature changes. They might have cracked for a whole bunch of different reasons. But irregardless, very often brand new swords will have cracked Tsukas on them, and And it's just shitty, really. It's not uncommon, but it doesn't make it less shitty. Just because it happens a lot, just because it's very common, doesn't mean that it's not shitty. Now, this does not feel bad. It doesn't like move or crinkle in my hand, and that's a good sign. It's made with panels, which aren't necessarily the strongest. You can't really make them out on my camera detail here, but you can see that there's a panel construction, and overall I don't see the edges of the panels, which is good. And the silk is tight enough that this crack may run somewhere down, but either way it's kind of held at bay with the silk. But in the event that you actually did some really hard cutting and put a lot of tension on the handle, this would get expanded and made worse over time. If you're doing a lot of cutting, it's very common that the crack will expand, and in some of the destruction tests that I've done, eventually the scow feels so kind of loose that it doesn't feel safe to manipulate the sword anymore. I really can't tell you how long it would take to do that, but the Tsuka being cracked indicates that it would be sooner than if the Tsuka weren't cracked. That's really about as much as I can say. I've cut with cracked Tsukas before, and they've cut just fine, and you haven't felt any difference. And I've done some very hard destructive testing, and when you whack it into like really hard objects that stop the sword, the crack can get worse. And anyway, it's tough to say how long it would be before this becomes very problematic, but the simple fact is, with a new sword, you'd really hope that you wouldn't get a fucking cracked Tsuka. Again, don't take this out too much on Hanwei. This is a thing that I spot on every sword manufacturer everywhere, maybe with the exception of Citadel, but I've only had 2 of those blades, so it's tough for me to really get a baseline on if they do it, and they're also a much higher priced sword option. But a lot of times it doesn't really matter how much you spend. I've had $2,000 Hanweis that have come with cracked Tsukas. I've had much less expensive swords that have come with cracked Tsukas. I've had less expensive swords that didn't come with cracked Tsukas, and I've had really expensive swords and plenty of Hanweis that didn't come with cracked Tsukas. It just seems to be something that doesn't get paid a lot of attention to. If you ask me why this happens, I think, and this is speculative on my part because I don't honestly know, but I think the Tsukas are made not necessarily with a particular blade in mind. They're made kind of as a template and then hammered or shimmed in, which isn't uncommon. It's not good, but it's not necessarily bad. It's really what you should expect from a production type environment where things aren't made individually in a very, very traditional way, or aren't made. Each component isn't necessarily made for that particular blade, but it's assembled at the end. If the blade is, or the Nakago is too big for what's already made, then it kind of gets hammered in or hammered on, and that can cause it to crack. You see some of that if you do a little bit of research online. I don't know if that's how this one was made, but what I do know, or at least the information I have, is that this is a new ska and it's cracked. So anyway, something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that one of these costs between $300 and $500 to get replaced if you do the whole new thing. If you take the Fuchi Kashira, the Minuki, and all that kind of stuff, and you find someone that can make a new Tsuka core and rewrap it and do the whole job again, to get it redone costs $300 or $400, maybe $500, depends on who you go to, and that can be the cost of a whole new sword. So keep in mind that if you buy a brand new sword and it's a production sword, check and see if it's cracked. If that thing bothers you or it gives you any pause, or you start to feel kind of wiggle happening in the handle, that's an indication that things are about to go poorly for you when you do hard cutting again, and it may be advantageous of you to have it rewrapped. I know it's expensive, but it definitely makes a difference if it's done by a professional, and it may not really be an option for you if you want to keep safe. Anyway, that's most of the bits that I have for you. I'm sorry I've been really late on all of the other stuff. Let me know if you have any thoughts about the Jody Sampson sword, the Hanwei Tactical Wakizashi, or if you have any thoughts about cracked Tsukas, or if they've happened to you, or if you haven't had that same experience. Be interesting to know in the comments below. I'm going to keep working on all of the reviews and all that kind of stuff, and I'm sorry I've been, just pretty much lazy. I just haven't done it, so I'm working on it though. Anyway, cheers, and thanks for watching.